Welcome to Forward Progress on the Hammer Betting Network. On this Tuesday, October 3rd, we've got an action-packed show. We'll discuss the Monday Night Football game last night, including how bad this Giants team might be, some film analysis on two specific games from last week, and we'll preview the Thursday Night Football game. Just a reminder, Forward Progress, Monday to Friday, every 2 o'clock, live stream. You should subscribe, hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any of this. Of course, none of this would be possible without our sponsor, Pinnacle. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sports book and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what the pros have known for the last 25 years. Everyday competitive odds, your trusted sports book. Bet smart, bet Pinnacle. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly. Not available in the U.S. With that being said, I'm your host, George Tsilfidis, and I'm excited to get this show on the road. I'm joined on Tuesdays, of course, by SharpClarke, NFL originator, betting analyst at 4for4.com. Clark, I see you've got the hat on. That means last week was a good week for you.
Yep. Only get the hat if I'm a winner. So last night was disappointing, but overall the weekend was good.
All right, we have different perspectives on how last night went, I guess. Let's dive into it. The Monday Night Football recap. The Seahawks blow out the New York Giants. And let's start off with the Brian Daboll chewing out Jones and then throwing a tablet because it got a lot of social media traction. A lot was made about this, and there was criticism about Daboll and his temperament. I didn't see it as a big issue. I wonder how you thought he handled it.
I actually haven't seen the clip, so I can't really comment on that. I think we always see clips of things that happen on the field, and we don't see the whole picture. I tend not to, not to judge those kinds of things too harshly. But
all right, let's talk about the Giants O-line and their struggles. And I would like to judge them harshly, if you will. Seattle hasn't had a great pass rush up until this game. And, a trip to New York will solve all woes. They got 11 sacks on the Giants. My question to you is, can the Giants contend if they don't fix this O-line in a major way? Like, even Andrew Thomas coming back isn't going to help, right?
No, I don't think they can contend. I also don't think they're really going to contend even if they do get their O-line back. Last year they were very, very fortunate to win so many of their games that they were kind of a fraudulent team from the get-go. And one of the biggest issues with last year's schedule was they played so many soft defenses. And against those soft defenses, they just kind of dinked and dunked down the field. And my handicap going into this year was, look at the defenses they're going to face this year. Seattle wasn't even one of those defenses that I was scared of, and they put up 3 points. So this is just basically a throwaway year for the Giants at this point. I'm out on them completely. I mean, I began out on them. I'm even more out on them now.
Well, let's talk about it, because Daniel Jones seems to be regressing and turning back into the pumpkin. Last year, Daboll stripped away some of the playbook, and he allowed Daniel Jones to just run the offense he was comfortable with. A lot of short passes, bootlegs, getting him off structure, some double option stuff with Saquon. And then, they started off 6-1 last year. Since then, they are 5-10-1, and kind of the script is out. My question is, why have they regressed? Is it just as simple as defenses now have on tape what Daniel Jones wants to do and does well, and basically they force him to not be able to do all that stuff? Or is it something else with him?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I mean, Daniel Jones does not have good vision. And Devon Witherspoon was right. He locks onto a read, and then he makes it obvious what he's going to do. What the Giants did last year was have these really easy to read routes, big bunch sets where there's only 2 or 3 people running routes, and they're all running them in the same area. So Daniel Jones can just kind of focus on that area. If it's there, throw it. If it's not, try and run. And that's just an easy offense to defend. And when defenses have that counterpunch, Daniel Jones doesn't have the answer. This offense doesn't have the answer. They don't have, downfield weapons. They don't have Saquon Barkley right now. Even if they did, I'm not sure. He's not a field stretcher. Like, they need to find a way to stretch the field and push the defense deep, and they're not doing that. I don't know what the answer is because they don't have the weapons to be able to do that. And Daniel Jones, frankly, is not a difference maker at quarterback.
All right, there's this great dynamic of end of October, early November. All the bad teams, we start asking the T word, right? Are they tanking? There happens to be a really good quarterback class coming in, including what seemingly is the next great one in Caleb Williams. The Giants' next 2 games are Miami and Buffalo, and they're probably staring down the barrel of 1-5. There's no coming back from that. Are the Giants bad enough, though, to end up with one of those top 3-4 picks and and turn their franchise around and get off this Daniel Jones contract? Or unfortunately, are they too good to not be that bad?
Against the schedule that they have, I think they are bad enough to get down there. I don't know. I don't think teams tank. I don't think it's an active thing that they do. Like we've seen it every year, even in the last week, what was it? The Texans last year, like miracle touchdown to win the game. It happens every year. So I don't really think they're going to tank. But as far as if I'm a Giants fan, am I rooting for them to get a bad pick? Like they paid Daniel Jones, I think it was 2 years guaranteed maybe. So that, they're kind of stuck for another year. But if they can get one of those top quarterbacks, it does look like a pretty good draft. I think that would be a win for the Giants if they can get a top 5 pick.
All right, I've got a theory here, and I wanna get your feel for it. The tush push by the Eagles, everybody wants to get rid of it. They say, "Oh, player safety, and it's cheap and it's automatic." And yet, the Patriots, Chargers, and Giants all tried it this week and failed in high leverage spots. Is it just about the quarterback, or do you have to have a really great center like Jason Kelce to also pull this off?
Yeah, I mean, it's either or. Any quarterback behind the Eagles' offensive line, I think, would be successful most of the time. Maybe not as much as Jalen Hurts. It's the techniques. Like they just take out the legs of all the defenders, and you just cannot get any leverage when your legs are not on the ground, right? Where are you getting the leverage from? Yeah. So the way the Eagles' offensive line works, a quarterback like Hurts is a perfect fit because of how strong he is and how strong his legs are. But I do think that if other teams had the Eagles offensive line and that training, whatever methodology they're using, then I think it'd be a lot easier for these other quarterbacks.
All right. Seahawks, they were 0-1 when we did our first show together. And, there was concerns, but I think both of us identified that the Rams were better than what people thought. They then go into Detroit and they win. They play Carolina at home and cover the number. They go to New York and they win and cover the number. They head into their bye 3-1. How good are the Seahawks? We obviously know that, there's the big three in the NFC, the Eagles, Dallas, and 49ers. Are Detroit and Seattle that far off behind those guys?
Detroit and Seattle are not. I think Detroit's way better than Seattle, personally. I was not impressed at all last night. I don't really understand the Seahawks love coming out of last night. I mean, let's look at their offense, right? They scored 24 points. 7 of those was a Drew Lock drive. Has nothing to do with Geno Smith. 7 of those was on a 5-yard field, or I don't know, 6-yard field, whatever it was. And 7 was on a pick 6. They did nothing with Geno Smith on offense. They averaged 15 yards per drive on 8 offensive drives against the Giants defense. Pretty terrible offensive performance by the Seahawks. Their defense played really, really well. But am I going to believe 3 weeks of a defense being mediocre at best, or one game against a Giants offensive line that's lost their center pretty early on, in addition to their left tackle? It wasn't good to begin with, lost a tight end against a quarterback that has deer in his headlights every time he drops back. Maybe Seattle's good. I'm not putting them anywhere near Lions right now.
All right. I usually like to watch football from a team level perspective.
Injury.
I think you do as well. And let me turn that off. I noticed one player who kind of flashed, Devin Witherspoon. The guy went 5th overall, incredible corner. The first thing I noticed was his willingness to tackle. It's like the anti-Deion Sanders, I just want to cover. This guy wants to hit you. He's got like a little bit of Jalen Ramsey in him.
Yeah, I was going to say Jalen Ramsey, yeah.
Because he wants to contribute in the run defense, but they blitzed him twice. He got there, 2 sacks. He has the pick 6. The kid looks like an absolute stud. Just wanted to shout him out. He's got to be the early front runner for Defensive Player of the Year, right?
Yeah, defensive rookie.
Yeah.
I mean, the Seahawks hitting on secondary draft picks again, it's wild. I mean, not that he was he was obviously a really good prospect that a lot of people liked, but just, playing out of his mind right now.
All right. The last night's game was short on offense, if that's your style of football. But we're going to do some film review with a game you're going to start and lead us off here that had a ton of offense, Commanders and Eagles.
Yeah, so the Eagles, I don't know if it was on this show, but I've been talking about how the Eagles have not looked great on offense. They lost Shane Steichen, and I've been concerned with their play calling. They just haven't been in sync. Things haven't been easy. But over the last few weeks, they've been building. Every week has looked a little bit better. And I thought this week their offense finally looked like their offense from last year, which is, they're 4-0. And so they managed to escape sort of a dysfunctional opening, few games on offense with some wins, which is great for them. But what I was seeing was the types of things that were working last year. That is, you've got A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. You send them on go routes and you throw the deep ball. It doesn't, obviously you want to complete it, but it doesn't matter if it's complete or not. What you're doing is you're instilling in those defenders the opposite of what the Giants are doing. You're saying, this is a play we're going to run, so you've got to defend it. And then they have A.J. Brown running a dead sprint and then stopping 8 yards downfield and turning around. And the defender is, way downfield. Jalen Hurts, all he has to do is sit behind his really good offensive line and throw an 8-yard pass to A.J. Brown. 2nd and 2. The Eagles are going to convert from 2nd and 2 every time, right? They can just tush push it twice and they're, they got a new first down. And so this was the offense that was working last year and they're doing it now. So I'm starting to see the play caller get more comfortable, and look a lot more like the Shane Steichen offense that we saw last year. So that was kind of my takeaway from even though they didn't cover the spread and almost lost the game. I came away impressed with the Eagles offense. Yeah. And, side shout out, Washington's offense also looked really good. Sam Howell avoided those kind of backbreaking mistakes that he made against Buffalo, and it made all the difference for them.
Yeah, he still got sacked 3 times when they were his fault on 3rd and long. Like, it feels like 3rd and long is like a 50-50 chance it's going to end in a sack, but he was better in a lot of spots. I thought they drew up a lot of more quick hitter offense. You said an interesting tweet last week about if you had if you had an opinion on Howell in a negative, the first 3 weeks kind of have confirmed your opinion. And if you had a positive on Howell heading into the season, the first 3 games have confirmed your opinion, right? It's that dynamic of we see what we want, because Howell gives you everything. He gives you really good and he gives you really bad. He like teeters the line. 2 things I do like. I like his poise. He doesn't feel like a rookie or oftentimes I look at Bryce Young lost out there, and whatever you want to say about his physical limitations, I don't think mentally he's not there in the moment. And how it doesn't faze him. I remember the Eagles had scored 4 straight scoring drives, and Washington needed a touchdown to stop the bleeding like blood. And he comes out, uses his feet, scrambles around, creates throwing lanes, ties up the game. And then, the last drive with 1:43 left, just incredible stuff, because he ran out of his timeout early when he got sacked and put himself in 2nd and 17. And he made all the plays. My question is, Ron Rivera not going for 2, and his excuse and his justification was the offense was tired. But in theory, then the defense should also be just as tired, correct?
Yeah, I don't really understand that reasoning. It was a terrible decision not to go for it. Like, I didn't have a money line bet on the Commanders. I bet the spread, but I always feel like, if coaches could just ask a bettor who has the money line on their team, hey, what do you want me to do here? that bettor would tell them the right thing 100% of the time, because and it's like these coaches can't figure it out. That was clearly a situation, especially with a Thursday night game coming up and a short week. Like, why play more football, against a team that's better than you? It made no sense. One thing that concerns me about Sam Howell is he doesn't avoid hits, right? Obviously, he takes a ton of sacks. That's not great for a guy with his frame. But when he runs, like, he'll scramble and get the first down, and he doesn't slide. He stays up, and then he just takes a massive hit. And a guy his size can't afford to take those hits. It almost feels inevitable, like a matter of time before he gets dinged up if he keeps playing that way. And there seems to be no evidence that he's going to change. We'll see. But that's one thing that concerns me about how long term.
Do you remember when the Lions played the Rams in the first year after the trade for Stafford? And the Rams were like 17-point favorites. The Lions hadn't figured out how to win yet at that point. And Dan Campbell, like, 4th down, he was faking punts. He was right. When you're the worst team, you need to increase the variance of the situation. Whereas, like, if you're the favorite, you play long enough, you'll beat a team if the game goes long enough because you're better. And that's why I don't understand Washington. You're an 8-point underdog or 9-point underdog. I know they're not thinking in terms of spread, but you understand there's a disparity in talent. Eagles are at home. You need to increase the variance and put it all on one play and give yourself the best shot to win that game. Whereas maybe the better team might opt for overtime because they believe that if the game plays out long enough, they're going to win. Let's talk Steelers and Texans. And I allowed you to peacock a little bit about Matthew Stafford. Allow me to have a few moments with the Texans and CJ Stroud. I've been appointed the CEO of the Stroud Boys. Clark, it's my new position. I was high on Houston. One of the reasons I told you was this fantastic O-line that is in shambles right now, and yet Houston's actually held up. I want to talk about Bobby Slowick for a second. He comes from San Francisco. They have no left tackle in this game, right? Laramie Tunsil's out. Josh Jones, his replacement's out. They've got 4 other guys on the IR, and they're in trouble, right? That's the handicap. If you bet the Steelers are going to overwhelm them. So what does Houston do on the first drive? You script your first 15 plays, outside runs, jet sweeps, Stroud scrambles, screens, and then finally the first pass to a non-running back was the last pass of the drive, a 2-yard throw into the end zone for Nico Collins. The Texans literally manufactured that entire touchdown drive. So well done job to Bobby Slowick. They also used a lot of quick passes to make up for the O-line being banged up. Even in empty, like they were getting the ball out in less than 2 seconds, hitting guys on quickly in the seams. CJ Stroud's internal clock is awesome. Like even on plays I'm watching where the O-linemen are getting completely folded, the ball's out. He realizes he's not going to wait and hang and try to make something happen. And Bobby Slowick right now is drawing up some good routes. Like Houston is, they're 4th in the league in yak. Like, and you look at the list, it's like 49ers and Dolphins and Houston. I'm like, oh, it's the San Francisco offense. That's what Bobby Slowick has brought in. And because of it, they've negated some of the downside of a bad O-line. We often talk about how, McDaniel's maximizing despite our limitations with the Dolphins O-line, or how, the 49ers on paper, this is the worst O-line, but their scheme is good enough to avoid this big negative impact of it. And that's a lot of what Houston's doing is that. So I've realized that. Now it's not all positive though. I think they're leaving a lot of meat on the bone. They score that opening drive touchdown, and then they score 3 straight field goals. Like they did not, put it into the end zone. So they only had a 16-point lead at half, which is not, it doesn't feel insurmountable. They also have this weird dynamic of CJ Stroud is like 12th in air yards, and you think, oh, he's slinging it. But the problem is they're skewed by like a few big plays. They lead the NFL with 12 pass plays over 25 yards. Like they hit a lot of big plays. Outside of it, a lot of what they do is like underneath stuff, slower stuff. That's like my overall thoughts on Houston. It's good, but it's not there yet, right? There's still some upside and potential. As far as Steelers, like their offense is cooked. They had 1 play over 10 yards in the first half. There's no deep threat. In fact, Pickett's first deep throw was intercepted by Steven Nelson. They didn't get into the red zone until the 3rd quarter. And then they this was their play selection. They finally get into the red zone, Clark. And we've talked about they can't get into the red zone all year. And they go run field goal, run field goal. It's like, what the hell are you even doing? So that was my takeaways. I came away very unimpressed by the Steelers offense and like it's bottom of the barrel bad right now. And as impressive as Houston is and they're scheming around, there's still some meat on the bone with this team.
Yeah, Kenny Pickett sucks against zone, and Houston plays zone, and also getting Jalen Petrie and Jimmy Ward back was huge for Houston. So yeah, a totally unimpressive performance by the Steelers offense. I think they're another team that I think they lost the left tackle in that game too, so they're kind of on the way down. With CJ Stroud, I think Insight in the comments is right. He said that's because the Steelers' game plan was to pressure Stroud so quick. It was almost like Bobby Slowick knew the defensive game plan, like even on like a play-by-play basis. It was like, okay, on this play, there was a blitz, and it was like, well, the screen pass is just waiting, ready for it. So it's like the offensive line lets the pressure in rather than, having a good offensive line. You say, all right, we don't have a good offensive line. The Steelers have TJ Watt and a good defensive line. They're gonna get to Stroud. Let's just let them get to Stroud and just have him get the ball out within 2 seconds every play. Yeah. And it's almost like another way of thinking about offense. Is like we like you said, we see it in San Francisco, we see it in Miami. There's having a good offensive line and dominating the trenches. This is kind of like the Eagles and the Lions style offense. There's having an elite quarterback who can, even under pressure, create plays like Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. And then there's this third way, which is like, okay, we don't need an offensive line. We don't need a quarterback. What we need is a scheme where we anticipate what the defense is going to do and just have the quarterback just be basically a processor where you react to what the defense does in the first 2 seconds, get the ball out to the playmakers and have them make plays. That's what Miami's doing, San Francisco's doing, and now Houston is doing. They don't have the same talent level. So I think that the ceiling is very, very much limited. Stroud is still making some mistakes, and so he got away with some throws that I think could have gone the other way maybe. Yes. So we'll kind of see how that goes with a lack of outside talent, and the offensive line needs to get healthy. But I think that they have the potential to be. I think we talked about this before the season. Like I didn't bet against or on the Texans preseason because if the offensive situation worked, I didn't know anything about the offense coordinator or the quarterback. If that worked, then they could be a decent team, and it's working right now. So I think they're a decent team.
I gotta say too, they all cover well. Like this is a pretty good pass defense, and it's without Derek Stingley, and at times they were missing Jimmy Ward and Jalen Petrie, like both safeties. So there's a lot of upside with this team. I kind of like the mojo around what DeMeco Ryans is doing. I like all the comments. Like Stroud, everything embodies leader. When I hear him speak, he comes out and he's telling Houston fans, yeah, you deserve to feel good. You've been in the dumps for too long. Like this guy, I got a crush on him. I've had a crush on him since college, and I'm happy that he's doing so well to start off. Let's talk about the AFC South, Clark. This was the joke. This was the worst division in the NFL. We laughed about it. I think only one of the team had preseason win total over 8. So they were all expected to have losing records. And yet every team is 2-2. So let's look into the division and what's going on with it. Let's start off with Jacksonville. I want you to tell me what you like or what optimism you have about them.
Trevor Lawrence. That's about it right now. Trevor Lawrence is a fantastic quarterback. It always pains me when people are like, "Is he even good?" I'm like, "Watch some film, man. The dude is a baller." And when you have an elite quarterback, and Trevor Lawrence is an elite quarterback, you have a chance to win any game. He's the type of player that can, use pressure against the defense. Like there was that one play in London where, they got the blitz home and he just threw a beautiful pass for the touchdown. But those plays have been too few and far between, and they're leaving way too many points on the table, whether it's, red zone failures or just, not making big plays, not capitalizing on third and short. It's just been everything has kind of gone wrong for the Jags, and they're 2-2. They're still probably the best team in the division, but they have to face the toughest schedule in the division still from here on out, including the Bengals late in the season. So there's a chance that the Bengals could have figured some things out by then. Burrow could be healthy, things like that. So I don't love the Jags schedule, but they have the quarterback element, and that's the number one most important thing in the NFL.
I wrote for optimism. Their defense hasn't been as bad as I expected. And you were right about like they are very bad in high leverage like spots, fourth downs, and like they're 6th worst in red zone touchdown percentage. They every time they get in the red zone, only 44% of the time do they get the ball in the end zone. And part of that's probably the O-line and their struggles to run as part of that aspect. Let's talk about I see some comments like you know what? Everybody wants to say already, why did the Panthers take Bryce Young over CJ Stroud, probably, and over Anthony Richardson? Like it's probably the earliest hot take of the year, and it might end up being right. We'll talk about it when we get to Indy and Houston, but let's go to Tennessee. What do you like and dislike, or what are you optimistic about, and what are your concerns?
Optimism is the defense. I really, really like this defense, and I think people I really dislike when people talk about a team's run defense versus a team's pass defense like they're these two different entities. Like when the ball is snapped and the quarterback hands the ball off, the run defense runs out on the field and stops the run. And when the quarterback drops back to pass, the pass defense runs out there and stops the pass. Like defense is a holistic concept. They go out there and typically when a team is better against the run than they are against the pass, like the Titans are, part of it, sure, is defensive talent up front, but part of it is just scheme and decision-making. The Titans' MO is we are going to make every yard difficult for you. Yeah. And if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us over the top, and you're going to have to connect on those difficult throws. And they're getting the secondary back healthier than it's been. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, good quarterbacks can really get going against them, sure. But against a team like the Bengals, we saw it. Like, they make every yard difficult, and teams that don't have the ability to overcome difficult circumstances will get crushed by this defense. And the Titans have a lot of teams on their schedule that kind of fit that offensive mold where it's going to be tough. And so they'll be in every game except for the ones where they play against an elite team, in which case they basically have no chance. So that's what I like about the Titans. I'm concerned about their offense. It's too stagnant. It's too straightforward. I was watching this week's game with a buddy who he watches every game through the lens of his fantasy football players. And you know the type, right?
Yeah.
Why doesn't Derrick Henry run on every single play?
He's wide open. You should throw it to this guy.
And so they line up for I think it was a 4th and 1, and Derrick Henry wasn't on the field. And he's like, I just don't understand. Why is Derrick Henry not on the field? It's 4th and 1. And I say, when you don't trust your offensive line to be able to create a yard of room, it doesn't matter who you have at running back, you're not getting that yard. And they know how bad their offensive line is. It's not good enough to get that 1 yard. That's going to be a problem for a team that is built that way. On their own offensive side, when things get tough, if Tennessee played Tennessee, it would be one of the ugliest games in the NFL.
I love that. You know what I wrote? I wrote, I like how they respond when they have a bad game. And I think that's on Vrabel, where they don't compound bad games. Like they've been blown out twice or looked pretty bad. And then the next game, it was a response. And like Vrabel's one of those great motivational, all right, that game happened. Let's get focused immediately. Here's what I wrote about concerns. Whenever they play a really good defense, they're in trouble. Like against a Brown, like there's no way their O-line can hold up. And frankly, like their pass game doesn't have the juice. DeAndre Hopkins, there's a reason why there was no bidding war for a minute. It's becoming very, very evident this year. Like it's right off a cliff. We saw the signs, just like Dalvin Cook. We saw some signs, and it's gone right off the cliff this year. So whenever they play a really elite defense, I think they're in some serious trouble. Let's go to Indianapolis. What's the optimism? What's the dislike? What's the concerns for you?
I thought the Colts were going to be a much longer term project with Anthony Richardson, and I've been very impressed with how they've looked. Anthony Richardson is probably the most optimistic thing about this team. I came in with low expectations for him, but all I heard off season was about his leadership, his poise, and that's why they instilled him as the starter on day one, because they said he can handle it. He knows that if he makes mistakes, like he gets right back up, and his mental game has been on full display. And what I loved about this week's game was it was very, very early in the game. I don't know if it was the first play, but it was first drive. He scrambled, and even short of the first down line, he slid when he was about to get hit. And the crowd goes nuts. Right? They start cheering for him. And it was an awesome moment, right? Because the exact opposite of what I said about Sam Howell, where there seems to be no contemplation by Sam Howell that like, hey, maybe I should be avoiding these hits. Like immediately, Anthony Richardson was like, I need to be smarter about my body, and showed it on. And that's the type of mental game that I think indicates we can extrapolate from that he's going to continue to get better as a player.
Yeah.
And I think pessimistically, they still lack a lot of weapons. They're still, really weak in the secondary. But they have the pieces to be competitive in this division this season. This is not a long-term, build. And once Jonathan Taylor comes back, if he comes back and if he's healthy, I think having the dual threat quarterback of Anthony Richardson can really open things up for Jonathan Taylor, and he will end up looking more like rookie Jonathan Taylor than sophomore Jonathan Taylor, which would be a great thing.
Yeah, you could just picture
second, third year, whatever. Yeah,
you could just picture Houston and Indianapolis sports talk radio right now. We've got our guy. It's the franchise, and then you could just picture Carolina sports radio. I would love to drive by, turn on the radio station, and probably hear a guy screaming for 3 hours on why they drafted the wrong quarterback, and no optimism in that city. Here's what I wrote. The Colts right now are dominating or are very successful in high leverage situations. Like they are the third best team in the red zone offensively. 73% of their red zone trips end up in a touchdown. But I said, because we've had this conversation, you don't believe that is it. You think there's more signal in that than noise. Because I say, make no mistake, this is an Anthony Richardson and O-line stat, their success in the red zone.
And
I think
Shane Steichen's stat too.
yes. Where I think they're getting lucky though is like they are living defensively, like they are not good against the pass. They give up a ton of yardage. They're like the 9th worst defense in success rate, but they've picked the ball off 5 times. So they're living off of high leverage plays like turnovers. So they have this skew of, remember we talked to Jordan Love, low success rate, high EPA per play. Well, the Colts are that on defense. They're 11th best EPA per play defensively, 9th worst success rate, and somewhere we got to find the real number there. So I think right now sometimes their defense is living off some high leverage plays. Let's talk Houston. What do we like, optimistic about? What do we dislike and are concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this. The offensive play calling and the way that it's meshing with CJ Stroud's quick decision making has been really impressive. It's a little bit similar to the Colts, right? I expected it to be a long-term, growth process. They don't have the weapons on the outside. They have some questions on defense, but they're getting it done and they're getting healthy, right? If they can get Laramie Tunsil back on the offensive line, they can get. They already got some of the safeties back. I don't know how serious Stingley's injury is. Maybe he's on IR, but this is a team that I think is well coached on both sides of the ball. Like their defense looked really, really good this week. And so having those 2 veteran safeties back, I think really helped. But I think the concern is that, what have they done in tight games, right? Every game has been a blowout. In the two games they lost, a lot of what CJ Stroud did was in garbage time, or was not garbage time, but like, soft zone defense is just being like, we'll let you take an 8-yard pass because the clock's going to run. You're not going to come back on us. And then in the other 2 games, it was like, well, they were kind of dominating. So what we haven't seen is like a game gets tight and, the defense has figured out these quick throws that they've been setting up. And now CJ Stroud has to go and make a play to, Nico Collins, Tank Dell.
I like Nico Collins. I think he's busting out the seams right now. He's on a rocket and he's doing very well on my fantasy team. But not to interrupt, what were you going to?
Yeah, and maybe, and the answer might be yes. But the thing about division winner or win total or make playoffs bets at this point is it's not enough to be in games. You've got to win those tight games. Like you have to do well in those games where the variance can swing either way. And I'm not sure who the Texans are in those types of games yet. I think if you're optimistic about them and think they can win those high leverage moments, if you think CJ Stroud can be the guy to lead the game winning drive down 3 with 2 minutes left, then I think this should be a team you should be optimistic on.
All right. I want to just say, if you're watching the stream and enjoying it, please hit the like button. We really do appreciate it. I love the comments going on in the chat. The chat is having their own show at the same time as us, and I love it. Jason, I want you to star Cottage's comment for later when we're talking about market movement, because that was specifically an interesting line move in the Houston-Atlanta game, and we'll get into that. Here's what I wanted to say. Houston, right now, when I say left meat on the bone, I held this stat back because they are the 2nd worst red zone offense in the league. Like 35% of the time, they end up having to not get the touchdown. And I wrote, defensively, I still question their run defense and their pass rush. And despite playing the Steelers' awful, run game, they're still bottom 10 in a lot of defensive run metrics. And usually the Steelers is a good way to on a 4-game sample size to skew yourself positively. And it didn't happen. Let's talk about the division prices, right? 2-2. Everyone's got a shot. There's optimism around. And Jason, if you can pull up Pinnacle's prices on the AFC South. Clark, when you see these prices, Jacksonville plus 145, Tennessee plus 255, Indy plus 325, and Houston plus 450. What kind of stands out to you?
This is like no surprise. Pinnacle's odds are like right on. I don't have an in-season futures model, so I don't have a strong opinion on any of the specific numbers, but I think that is the order of quality of teams in the division as of today. But again, the schedule is much more difficult for the Jaguars than it is for the ones below, and the Titans for that matter. Like I know the Jaguars have to play Buffalo this week. I know the Titans have Miami on their schedule, whereas the Colts and Texans get the bottom of the barrel in that division. Yeah. For example, I think it's going to come down to the division matchups basically. And what we've seen so far is a little bit wild because Jacksonville beat Indianapolis in Indy, Houston beat Jacksonville in Jacksonville, and then Colts beat Texans in Houston.
Yeah.
So like it's like a round robin between those three teams, and like what happens in the second leg of all of those is going to go a long way in determining the division.
What were you saying?
I was going to say, like, if I were forced to play a bet, it would probably be, hey, like that Houston price is a little low considering how well they're playing. It should be much more in line with the Colts, I think.
Yeah, I remember when I talked to you about entry points and looking a little bit at the schedule and figuring out when is a good time to jump in. Here's what I wrote for the immediate schedule for all four teams. Indy's immediate schedule is home to the Titans, at Jags, home to the Browns, home to the Saints, at Panthers, at Patriots. Houston's immediate schedule is at Atlanta, home to the Saints, at the Panthers, home to the Bucks, at the Bengals, home to the Cardinals. Jacksonville's immediate schedule is versus the Bills in London, home to the Colts, at Saints, at Steelers, home to 49ers, home to the Titans. And Tennessee's immediate schedule is at Indy, home to the Ravens, home to the Falcons, at Steelers, at the Bucks, at the Jags. Based on that, I like the prices on Indy and Houston. That'd probably be the direction I'm leaning in. I also think that there's upside where they'll probably get better later in the season as their rookies get a little bit more experience. And frankly, they've dealt with the most health issues in the division, right? Houston hasn't been able to field an O-line. And Indy, like, they lost Richardson for a game and they haven't had Taylor, and their center Ryan Kelly, and then Bernard Raymond gets concussed in Friday's practice. The Colts have also been banged up, injury rise. So those would be the two spots that I'd be looking to make a bet. I love the engagement in the chat. I wanted to pull up a comment when we look at the current market lines and value. Jason, can we pull up that Houston Atlanta comment? Market loves Houston. Did the Atlanta line move too much? So the look ahead was about 3.5. And obviously Houston beats Pittsburgh, and Atlanta loses to the Jags in an isolated game on London. So it's like it has extra eyeballs on it. People are fully aware of what happened. And then the line looked like it opened up 2.5, 3. Then it got bet Houston immediately down to pick 'em -1. But this morning, people found their Atlanta love again and pushed this line back up to 2, 2.5, depending what book you looked at. Clark, has the movement surprised you? And do you think there's going to be a landing point for this number? Are we getting to the 3? Will we get back to a pick 'em, or does this feel about right?
I was a little surprised by the buyback on Atlanta. There's really nothing to feel good about with the Falcons right now. I was expecting it to kind of go to pick and then kind of like hover around there and kind of have a little battle around pick for the rest of the week. But some pretty strong action on Atlanta this morning, like you said, although, moving from pick to 1.5 is not the biggest move. But I'm just surprised to see market resistance in this game. And I really like this week's slate because I like games where there's a battle in the market. I hate even when I'm on like the side of the movement. I hate when it's just one way movement. Like, yeah, the Vikings covered last week, but it was like everyone was betting the Vikings and there was like no buyback, and it just felt so uncomfortable. Like, I much prefer it when I can see the battle happening. So this is a game that I haven't really settled in on yet, but I will say I was surprised to see the Atlanta money come in.
I think there's like a lot of different dynamics at play here. So there's if you were optimistic on Atlanta before the season, maybe you're still holding on to a little bit of that. I think part of it is the coming back from London and playing immediately factor, where people depressed the line a little bit in their numbers because of the unusual rest situation. I think there's the overreaction of Houston looks pretty good, man. Stroud, I got to fire and get ready. And then I think there's some people that were higher on Houston preseason, and it's just confirming what they thought of Houston at this point. So I think there's a lot of battle, a lot of spots and push and pull. Both teams are 2-2. It's one of the more fascinating moves of the week. What about I want to talk to the Jacksonville Buffalo game. I remember when I was creating my lines, and before I look at the other lines, I remember seeing the number and I'm like, oh, this can't be right. And then I look at the market and it's right where market is. And I'm like, okay, maybe it is right. Are you surprised Buffalo is this like under a touchdown, under 6? Or do you think part of it is, listen, Jacksonville is in London. They have no travel this week. They're comfortable in the situation and they probably have a home crowd edge, even if it's smaller than a typical home style edge.
Yeah, I think there's lots of sort of trends analysis that favors the Jaguars here. I don't really put much stock in it, but I mean, travel is real. I mean, you got a team that's staying in London. Like, we've seen teams that stay away from home do better, do well in the back-to-back because, you know, there's like team bonding. You're all hanging out together. You're in the hotel together, all that kind of stuff. You know, you don't have the home distractions or whatever. And on top of that, like, the Bills just played their early season Super Bowl, and now they have to travel to London to take on a Jags team. So I understand why there would be interest on the Jaguars here. My numbers also suggest it should be higher, but I understand why it's there. It's just it's you can't really compare it to a normal game. Like, the Jaguars do have somewhat of a home field advantage here in even though there'll be a lot of Bills fans there, it's, NFL fans in England are pretty split, but I just think the Jaguars are more comfortable in this situation than the Bills.
All right, let's not just that. The Bills came off like a pretty emotional beat down again. You stamped out your point against the Dolphins. There's a little there could be a little bit of letdown in preparation in this game. Let's talk about I thought the Baltimore-Pittsburgh move was fascinating. I remember talking to Cleve yesterday on the show about, like, the lines are like, I've never seen a line bigger than 3.5. It feels like in the AFC North in like 5 years. That's the number, right? Like, it's usually under a field goal. And if a team's far better, 3.5 as far as it can go, because there's that reputation that everyone plays each other tight in this division. And yet the line got out to 4.5, 5. Then we get the news that Pat Fryermuth's probably going to miss the game, and Dan Moore Jr. is going to miss the game for Pittsburgh. And we're probably going to get some positive injury regression for Baltimore this week. And yet there was a buy of Pittsburgh this morning and brought the line back down to 3.5. Are you surprised?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. I mean, the Steelers offense without Deontay Johnson, without Pat Fryermuth, without the left tackle Dan Moore, without Kenny Pickett potentially. Although, I don't know, Pickett, Trubisky, 6-1, half dozen the other, I think. But it just is like, the Steelers are not a good team. They're missing Cam Hayward. They're I don't know how they're 2-2. Like, I mean, I guess I know how they got a bunch of defensive touchdowns against Cleveland, and then played, kind of a weird game against Las Vegas, but they're not very good. The Ravens are, and they're, like you said, they're hopefully getting healthier. Like, it's not something I'm betting on because I just have to see that injury report every week for the Ravens. But if they can get a couple guys back each week and not sustain additional injuries, then I think the Ravens are in position to control the division. And so, the offense is starting to click a little better. They've had some ups and downs, I think, and a lot of that is injury related, but we're talking about a new offensive system for Lamar Jackson that he's learning and growing in as the weeks go on. And I think this is a spot where, if the Ravens are healthier and they kind of like take a lead against the Steelers, it doesn't really seem like a good spot for the Steelers to play comeback and we can trade punch for punch. Like, I don't know where that punch comes from. It's going to be Kenny or George Pickens down the sideline for a big play, and then no consistency outside of that. The Ravens have actually been pretty decent against the run, so yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised by the Steelers' money.
Here's my question. Like, if the Browns game doesn't happen, where they get like this, miracle of events, because they're 2-2, and like, it's probably the least optimistic 2-2 team that I can think of. They could be sitting at 1-3. I think the Steelers have been the second best team in 3, maybe 4 games this year, all 4 of their games. And it just feels like if the Steelers were 1-3, there's no way that this number would be sitting at what it is right now.
Well, it's a follow-on from last year where, like, people are like, well, Mike Tomlin just knows how to win games, right? Every year he's going to at least be 50-50. And it's like, the way they won some of those games last year was absolutely ridiculous. And it's like, did Mike Tomlin do that? Like, is there some magical thing that he just makes these high variance situations go his way? Like, I don't think so. I think that kind of stuff runs out. But again, here we are at 2-2 with a very unimpressive Steelers team, right? So I understand the historical reasons why people want to back the Steelers, especially as underdogs. But that's just not how I bet.
All right, Clark. Week 1, they don't get into the red zone until the third quarter. Week 2, they don't end up in the red zone at all. Last week they didn't get into the red zone until the third quarter. This isn't sustainable, right? This is crazy. Their offense sucks. It might be one of the worst offenses in the league. Whether you believe that talent-wise, it's been one of the worst offenses in the league. despite having they've been fortunate as far as turnover luck, and they haven't generated too many offensive turnovers. So there's potentially an even worse bottom for this team if those things go against them. Let's talk about Cincinnati, Arizona. Clark, I told Cleve, if I told you that the Cincinnati Bengals were -3 against the Arizona Cardinals in week 5, you would think that Joe Burrow is probably out and Kyler Murray's probably in. Like that, there's that only world where we saw that line possible. And yet here we are. The Bengals opened at 4.5 and the line's down to 3. And I have PTSD and I don't know if I want to bet it. And I'm probably waiting on the T. Higgins news, but are you surprised we're sitting at 3? And do you think we're going to close again over 3 again?
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, I think this could even come down under the 3 personally.
Wow.
The Bengals have been terrible. Like, tell me one reason why, like, because they were good last year. Like, this is a different team. This happens every year. I mean, even last year, like we talked about this in the offseason, like I obviously thought that a lot of last year was not as impressive as most people did. I think there were some cracks showing even before the season. And so when something happens like a calf injury for Joe Burrow, that really takes away the most dangerous parts of their offense. It really shows you like how bad the rest of it is. And that's what we're seeing. Now, there's a chance that the Cardinals defense is not good enough to get to Burrow. And if Burrow has 2.5, 3 seconds on each play, then I think his lack of mobility, won't cost them as much as it did against the Titans, obviously. But I just don't think we've seen anything from this Bengals team to suggest they should be big road favorites over a Cardinals team that's playing pretty well.
All right, let's talk about Philly Rams. I want to give you a chance to, pound your chest a little because you were right on Stafford. That line was 5.5 at some points. And there are some questions about, if the left tackle Alaric Jackson will be back and Stafford's hip. And there's questions about Cooper Kupp and if he's going to play this game. There is a chance they're not completely ruling it out. And the Eagles are missing one of their starting offensive linemen. Cam Jurgens already ruled out for this game. There was some buy on the Rams, and we're sitting at 4. Is this going to be a case where maybe we see movement again back to the Eagles, back to the Rams, and we haven't found the tension point yet? Or do you think there still could be some movement left for the Rams, and this thing might come even lower?
It's possible. I don't have a strong read on this game. Like you're dealing with a good offense in the Rams and a bad defense in the Eagles, at least what we've seen so far this year. Mm-hmm. And so anytime you have an underdog of over 3 in that situation, like the underdog can be very tempting because you have a lot of confidence in them playing well from behind.
Yeah.
But I just got done talking about how impressive the Eagles offense was last week. So I think they really are starting to click. So I really wanted to play the over in this. It was much lower earlier in the week, and then someone hit it like literally seconds before I did. I think there'll be points in this game, provided Matthew Stafford is healthy. But as far as the side goes, I could see it going either way. I think it's in the right area. I think it'll close, between 3.5 and 4.5. I don't think we really move out of that range.
All right, let's talk about the Thursday night football game. This was another one when I was making my numbers, and I made Washington a big enough favorite. I looked and I'm like, oh, I got to be way off here. Am I over? Because I was one of the optimists on Washington. I wanted a piece of them over 6.5 wins. I wanted and bet them at plus 230 to finish 3rd in the division, based on the dynamic that the top 2 teams are clearly the top 2 teams. And I didn't think there was much daylight separating them and the Giants. So I was wondering if I had a little bit too much optimism in Washington and maybe a little bit too much, skepticism in the Bears. And opening market number, I was pretty close to where it was. Now Washington got bet some, and it went from 6.5 to 7. It's back down to 6.5. There was some buyback on the Bears. Forget the line for a second. Let's talk about the game. How do you expect and see this game playing out?
I think Washington's offense should be able to succeed against a weak Bears defense. The Bears just got torched by the Broncos. They got torched by the Chiefs. Granted, the Chiefs are good. Even the Bucs did pretty well against them. And then Green Bay also torched them. So the Bears defense has shown nothing, and they've also gotten hurt since week 1. Like they're missing both their starting cornerbacks, maybe 3 of their starting cornerbacks.
All 3. They got 1 on the IR. They're missing 2 more. The safety Eddie Jackson's hurt. Like the secondary is in shambles.
Yeah, so I understand why the line would be, so high at home for a Washington team that's really not that good, but they should be able to win on offense. The question I think for bettors is, are the Bears going to be able to stay in the game, right? Because covering 6.5, 7 just means you're staying in the game. Doesn't mean you're
Yes.
winning. It just means you're not getting blown out. And I think we've seen 4 games from the Bears. 3 were very ugly, and then 1 where they took a massive lead and then blew the lead and lost by 3, which obviously is fine if you're gonna, if you're spread at 6.5 or 7.
Yeah.
What concerns me about the Bears is that because of those 4 game scripts, they've never been good playing from behind, at least this season, right? So we've seen in games where they don't have the lead, they've played poorly on offense. And then in the game where they played well on offense, it was like early on, and sort of with the lead, right? So what happens if Washington builds a big lead? Do we trust Justin Fields and this offense to kind of be explosive enough to come back? I know there's some concerns about Washington's linebackers. Can they keep up with Fields? Fields might have a big field day running the ball here.
Yeah.
And I think he'll have to, right, in order to keep up. But the other thing is both teams like to run the ball, which can slow down the games and reduce the number of drives that are played. Again, with a big spread that favors the underdog. So this is another game that I love because there's been price action on both sides. There were some people that were super eager to take the Commanders when the spread was lower than 6 at 6, and then there were people that were super eager to jump on the Bears when it got to 7. This is the kind of game that I love to see in the market, where it's like, okay, you can really form your position and then take it against the other bettors.
Yeah, there's 2 dynamics, like, the game of the week, right? Like, I remember last year, the Dallas Minnesota game where there was, a lot of people wanted to bet that game and they felt very strongly of, and I couldn't get myself into an opinion for that game. And this is another one, like, everybody sees an angle that they want to attack. The only thing I'm thinking of is a team total perspective here, that I want to buy on, and I'm going to wait a little bit. I wrote, this is probably Sam Howell's best defense to play. Like, he's done a pretty good job so far against tough situations, or he's been sacked a ton. This is probably the one defensive line that will not give them a ton of problems. I think they have 2 sacks on the year. They're not a very good D line. They don't pressure the quarterback well, and maybe this could be Sam Howell's really big moment. So other than that, I find myself hard to get really amped up to make a bet in this game, as much as other people are.
Yeah, I like it. I like those games where there's a lot of tension.
Yeah.
But Thursday night, you got the short week factor. You've got Washington coming off a very tough overtime loss to a division rival. Like, there's all kinds of angles that people want to play in this game, which I love.
Yeah, and I got a feeling this will be even the player level stuff. Like, if you like I could see the Fields rushing overs and Terry McLaurin game. This is the Curtis Samuel game. I can see a lot of people getting excited to bet this game.
Even though last week these 2 teams played and it was like, what, 17-9 or something.
Maybe it's a psychological thing when we know the game is going to be that bad, that we got to bet something on it for entertainment purposes. For myself, it'll probably just be enjoying a ugly Thursday night football game. I don't know if it's in me, but I love bad football. Like, and some people don't. I think it's like me proving that my love for NFL is so deep that I love it unconditionally, even if it gives me a turd of a game on national TV. Those are the ones where people are tweeting, I need to turn this off. And, like Denver last year in primetime, all those times, I loved every second of it. Those games they reaffirm why I love the NFL so much. Clark, I love doing the show with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, George.
As a reminder, Forward Progress will be back again tomorrow at 2:00 with Rob Pizzola, Eric Egersuma, and Hitman, giving you their best bets and breaking down games from a betting perspective. Drop us a like before you bounce. I want to give an extra special shout out to the audience in the comments. You guys were fantastic. I love seeing engagement. I love when you guys are having your own conversation. Do more of that, please. I enjoy the comments. I go back and read them. That's it for me. Thanks to SharpClarke. Thanks to producer Jason. Once again, thanks to our great audience, and hope you enjoy tomorrow's show. Until next time.